As the Soviet armies poured into Hungary to put down the revolution for freedom and democracy, Imre Nagy was addressing the people before his death at the hands of communists. Nagy had fought for Hungary. Nagy was a benevolent communist, much like Tito of Yugoslavia. He was a light-hearted communist that opposed Stalin's ideals. Nagy said, "This fight is the fight for freedom by the Hungarian people against the Russian intervention." It is easy to forget about revolutions like this against tyrants and despicable, corrupted government. To really find answers, people must study the causes. The main causes of the Hungarian Revolution include World War II effects, Soviet intervention, and salami tactics from the communist leader Rákosi. In World War II, Hungary had been attacked by Germany. Hungary was a central war zone with multiple battles taking place in its main cities. The war-torn country was ruined. The city of Budapest had tanks overrunning it and destroyed buildings. The Soviet Union came into Hungary to free them. After the Soviet Union freed Hungary, communist ideals were spread in the small country. A communist named Matyas Rákosi controlled the country as a dictator before the hero Imre Nagy. Rákosi picked up communist ideals from World War I and embraced them. Rákosi supported communism and most of all Stalin. Rákosi used propaganda as a knife. Rákosi also used salami tactics as a way to take power and cut away opposition. Salami tactics are ways to cut off a government and seize power. The USSR was helping Rákosi put communists into power and put propaganda up. Rákosi once said in 1949 his salami tactics were cutting them off like slices of salami. Rákosi often boasted of his political success, for he had crushed other parties and made a Stalin-like rule for himself in Hungary. Over time, the Communist Party took over. The Communists took control and banned other political parties. Citizens were forced to become communist or face dire consequences. Jobs were taken and rights revoked. The communist government was put in place and Rákosi was put into power. Reforms took place that ruined the economy. Farms were grouped into communes and the agricultural budget was cut. A famine came and left families dying in cities. Hungary's resources were depleted by Russia. Among others who needed Hungary's food and raw materials to support their ailing economies, Rákosi's reforms made industry a priority for Hungary. The country wasn't ready to be industrialized. People were forced to work for the machine of communism. Privacy was also taken away. The secret police, the AVO, had files on almost everybody in Hungary, acting up to bring you and your family death, prison, or torture. Rákosi's salami tactics brought him into power and kept him in power. In the end, his salami tactics helped him conquer Hungary. However, Imre Nagy made Hungary a better place. The political and ideological legacy of Imre Nagy revealed heroic leadership as he stood up to the Soviet Union and put America's Truman Doctrine to the test.
Imre Nagy is a political hero because he created political policies and reforms that relieved citizens from the communist burden. He stood up against the Soviet Union, he made reforms for the poor, and he built upon the influence of the secret speech by challenging Rákosi. The secret speech was made by Nikita Khrushchev, leader of the Soviet Union. Khrushchev denounced Stalin, stating, "It is clear that Stalin showed in a whole series of cases his intolerance, his brutality, and his abuse of power. Nagy capitalized on this weakness in Soviet leadership. The speech gave momentum to Hungary's revolution. The time to act was now." Throughout the revolution, there were radio takeovers in Budapest and other towns. Many citizens would go to stations and broadcast pleas to stop shooting. One person was reported to say, "Soviets, stop shooting, avoid bloodshed, put down your guns." During the revolution, students revolted. Students were the most unhappy because they wanted a better government and more freedom. There were 16 demands created by Hungarian student colleagues. The 16 demands included the immediate withdrawal of Soviet troops, the election of new leaders on the Hungarian Workers' Party by secret ballots, and the government should be reconstituted under the leadership of Comrade Imre Nagy, as well as many more. As blood started to flow, many tanks were brought in, and in Budapest the streets were lined with destruction, distorting the beautiful city with war scars. Many people took down war memorials, and Soviet red stars were sent tumbling down. Russian flags were set aflame, and as well as Soviet books. As the revolution raged on, Nagy decided to pull Hungary out of the Warsaw Pact. Throughout the rebellion, Imre Nagy continued to show leadership by imposing Rákosi's ideals and questioning America's Truman Doctrine. When Hungary fell to communism, Nagy continued to give hope to revolutionaries. The Truman Doctrine is the promise from the United States to give aid to countries resisting communism. Nagy felt that the United States went against their foreign policy by not aiding Hungary during the revolution.
This is Hungary calling. This is Hungary calling. The last remaining nations or to the United Nations. Early this morning, the Soviet troops launched a general attack on Hungary. We are requesting you to send us immediate aid in the form of parachute troops over the Trans-Danubian provinces. For the sake of God and freedom, help Hungary!
Nagy had pled for military aid from the UN and the US, but received no aid. Nagy denounced Soviet use of force against revolting citizens. On November 2nd, tanks massed around Budapest. Imre Nagy pleaded for quick action. A US ambassador remarked that it is plain as it can be that we cannot ignore such a plea. President Eisenhower agrees to provide supplies to embattled Hungarians, but the Truman Doctrine was not invoked. 2 days later, 200,000 Soviet troops invade Budapest. The United States was too late. Imre Nagy is an ideological hero because he had ideas for the people and fought Rákóczi through an idea war. During the 1950s, Nagy was a symbol of hope. Even after Nagy was killed and the communist government was back in place, his ideas to help the people stayed in the government and affected the eventual freedom of the country. A hero is someone who used bravery to save others and help make the world a better place. A hero is also someone who does small but great acts in life. The greatest heroes are those who try to do what they know is right in very difficult circumstances.
Imre Nagy and the Hungarian Revolution caused some importance in history throughout this time period. Imre Nagy, as the hero of Hungary, was martyred by the Soviet Union for his non-communist beliefs.
Outrage sweeps the non-communist world in reaction to the execution last week of Imre Nagy and 3 other leaders of Hungary's freedom fighters of 1956. In Bonn, Hungarian refugees and West Germans, some 400 in all, demonstrate outside the Soviet embassy, at first peaceably, until angry emotions grow too strong. Police move in as a barrage of rocks is loosed.
Now in Hungary, Imre Nagy Day is October 23rd. His memorial statue is located in Budapest, Hungary, as well as the Imre Nagy Memorial House, all dedicated to Imre Nagy and his heroism against the Soviet Union. After the Hungarian Revolution, the Poles had the guts to fight back. Imre Nagy showed that Hungary knew how to stop and rebel against the Soviet Union. First Hungary, now Poland. In the second half of 1956, Poland had a political change throughout. They called it Polish October. Another result of the Hungarian Revolution was the massive escape of 200,000 Hungarians who were leaving communism.
And there was a massive exodus, 250,000, many of them who simply walked all the way from Budapest to the Austrian border and got across at that point. Many of them coming to France, many of them coming to Britain, many of them coming to Canada, many of them coming to the United States. And so in many respects, the best and the brightest fled the country.
There was all this yelling and halt, and flashlights and a bunch of soldiers. At the same time, you could see these red flares. The Austrians were shooting up red flares. That's their, we knew how close we were to the border, and finally, we knew we were at the border because there was a little mound of dirt and there was an Austrian flag flying in there, and people just kneel down and kiss the soil, and we were crying.
These stories and experiences of all the Hungarian escapees have really shaped the importance of the Hungarian Revolution. By 1989, the Berlin Wall will be torn down. Germany will unify in 1990. Gorbachev resigns as the president of the USSR, and the Soviet Union will dissolve in 1991. The legacy of Imre Nagy showed heroic leadership as he stood up to the Soviet Union and put America's Truman Doctrine to the test. A hero is a person in the face of adversity and danger overcomes a challenge, just like Imre Nagy did. With the Soviet Union, he overcame that challenge. October 23, 1956 is a day that will live on forever in the annals of free men and nations. It was a day of courage, conscience, and triumph. No other day since history began has shown more clearly the eternal unquenchability of a man's desire to be free, whatever the odds against success, whatever the sacrifice required. John F. Kennedy.